Alex was just finishing up the last of his work for the day. His small, cluttered workshop was filled with the hum of machinery, the faint scent of oil and metal in the air. He had always loved working with his hands, fixing broken technology, and turning it into something new, something better. It was quiet, peaceful even, the kind of place where Alex could escape the noise of the world outside. He didn't expect much to change tonight, but when the door to his workshop swung open, it was clear his evening was about to take an unexpected turn. Standing in the doorway was a giant. Alex's eyes widened in shock. A dragon. Not just any dragon, but an ancient battle-worn veteran. The creature's scales glistened under the dim light, with deep dark shades of green and silver. His wings were folded against his back, but they looked large enough to create a storm if they were spread out. His eyes, fierce yet tired, locked onto Alex as he stepped forward. The dragon's name was Thalros. For a moment, Alex didn't know what to say. His heart pounded in his chest. He'd heard stories of dragons, beasts of legend and mystery, but never had he imagined meeting one in person. The dragon's presence was overwhelming, like a storm had entered the room. And yet there was something strangely calming about him, as if his presence was not just one of power, but also of wisdom. Thalros stood there, towering above Alex. His scales were covered with the marks of countless battles, scars that spoke of a lifetime filled with war and survival. Alex's mind raced, trying to understand what was happening. Why was a dragon here? Why had he come to a small, human mechanics workshop? But Thalros spoke before Alex could voice his thoughts. "I need your help." The dragon's voice rumbled, deep and calm, yet there was a heaviness in it. "I'm in need of a ship." Alex blinked, unsure of how to respond. A ship? What kind of ship did a dragon need? Thalros continued, sensing Alex's confusion. "I'm a warrior. Once I commanded armies. Now I'm but a veteran, seeking a new purpose. But I can't do it alone. I need to get off this planet, and I need someone who understands machines," Thalros explained. Alex's mind was spinning. A veteran dragon, off-world. But what did that have to do with him? His work was with engines, not with magical creatures. He had never even dreamed of a dragon needing his help. Yet there was something in the dragon's eyes, a sincerity that Alex couldn't ignore. After a long pause, Alex nodded. "I don't know if I can be much help, but I can take a look at what you need. I have a ship I've been fixing up for myself, but it's not much. It's not exactly space-worthy yet." He scratched his head, feeling a bit embarrassed. The ship he had been working on was a small, outdated model. It wasn't the kind of craft a dragon would usually be interested in. But there was something about Thalros that made Alex want to help. Maybe it was the dragon's age, his aura of wisdom, or the simple fact that he had never met anyone like him. Thalros gave a small nod, acknowledging Alex's offer. He didn't seem disappointed, which surprised Alex. Instead, the dragon's gaze softened. "Then I will work with you," Thalros said. "I will help you, as you help me." From that moment, an unlikely alliance formed. Over the next few hours, Alex and Thalros worked side by side. The dragon, despite his intimidating appearance, had a quiet patience about him. He watched Alex as the human mechanic adjusted the ship's wiring, examined the engines, and started fine-tuning the controls. Thalros, with his vast experience in war, seemed to know a great deal about tactics and strategy, offering advice on how to improve the ship's weapon systems, even though he was no expert in technology. For Alex, it was like working alongside a living legend. Thalros had been to worlds Alex had never even heard of, fought battles that seemed impossible to imagine. He had stories to tell, each one more amazing than the last. Alex found himself listening intently, fascinated by the dragon's experiences. Despite the pain in Thalros's voice, there was a sense of hope that lingered around him. It wasn't all about battle and war. There was wisdom in his words, a knowledge of the universe that Alex could never have imagined. As the hours passed, Alex found himself growing more comfortable around the dragon. He'd always felt a sense of isolation in his work, just him and the machines. But now, with Thalrose, there was a sense of purpose. The two of them, working together, seemed to create something greater than just the sum of their parts. For once, Alex didn't feel alone in his mechanical world. But the task at hand was no small feat. The ship, though functional, was far from ready for space travel. Its engines were unstable, and there were parts that needed replacing. Still, Alex didn't mind the challenge. He loved fixing things, and working with Thalrose made it feel like a mission, not just a job. There was something satisfying about the idea of helping a legendary dragon, of being part of something bigger than himself. Thalrose, for his part, did what he could to assist. He had a surprising knack for understanding the mechanics of the ship, despite his lack of formal knowledge. Perhaps it was the same way he had understood the intricacies of war. The mind of a warrior was one that could adapt to any challenge. As the night wore on, the two grew closer, their bond strengthening with each passing moment. Alex no longer saw Thalrose as just a dragon or a warrior. He saw a friend, someone who had lived through unimaginable hardship and still carried on with a quiet determination. Just as Alex tightened the last bolt on the engine, the ship's systems came online. The hum of the engines was steady, and the lights flickered on, casting a soft glow across the workshop. The ship was far from perfect, but it was ready for a test run. Alex turned to Thalrose, a grin spreading across his face. "It's not much, but it'll work," Alex said. Thalrose's ancient eyes gleamed with approval. "It is more than enough," he replied, his voice steady. "Now, we take the next step." And with that, the two of them prepared to face whatever lay ahead. A human mechanic and a dragon veteran, ready to set out on an adventure neither could have imagined. The following days passed in a blur as Alex and Thalrose worked relentlessly on the ship. Each day, Alex grew more accustomed to the dragon's presence. At first, it had been hard for him to believe that someone as legendary as Thalrose, a dragon veteran who had fought in the greatest wars of the galaxy, was standing in his workshop, helping him repair a ship. But now, it felt almost natural. They had become a team. An unlikely, mismatched team, but a team nonetheless. The work was tough. Alex had to think through every challenge with a new perspective. He was used to fixing engines, machines, and tools, but working on a ship that might carry a dragon through space felt like a much bigger task. It wasn't just about getting the ship to fly. It was about making it worthy of the power and legacy that Thalrose carried with him. The dragon's presence seemed to bring a kind of gravity to the situation. He wasn't just any passenger, after all. He was a warrior who had commanded armies and faced dangers beyond anything Alex could even begin to imagine. Thalrose, despite his intimidating size and strength, was remarkably patient. He didn't rush the work or demand more than Alex could do. Instead, he watched, helped where he could, and shared his wisdom about space travel, old technologies, and alien machinery. Thalrose had seen ships from countless worlds, fought in battles with advanced tech Alex had never even heard of, and experienced things that would make most humans run in fear. Yet he spoke of it all calmly, as if it was simply another part of his long existence. One evening, as they took a break from the ship's repairs, Thalrose sat outside the workshop, gazing at the stars. The dragon's wings were folded tightly against his back, and the glow of the nearby city illuminated his dark scales. His gaze seemed lost in thought, a faraway look in his eyes. Alex walked over, wiping his hands on a rag. "You miss it, don't you?" he asked. "The old battles, the wars." Thalrose didn't turn to look at him, but his voice was soft as he replied. "I miss the purpose, the certainty, the feeling of knowing what comes next." He paused, as if weighing his next words. "But what I miss the most is the honor. It was never about the fighting. Not really. It was about protecting those who couldn't protect themselves, about fighting for something bigger than myself." Alex listened carefully, It was strange to hear a dragon speak so openly about his past, about something that clearly weighed on him. Thalros had been a soldier, a leader, someone who had shaped the history of entire worlds. But now, after all the battles, he was here, working with Alex, a human mechanic. Alex couldn't help but feel a sense of responsibility, as if by helping Thalros, he was helping carry a piece of history, something far greater than his small workshop. "You're not alone anymore," Alex said quietly. "You've got me. I mean, I'm just a mechanic, but I'll help you get where you need to go." The dragon turned to face him, his eyes narrowing slightly as if trying to gauge the sincerity in Alex's words. After a long pause, Thalros nodded. "Thank you, Alex. You may not know it yet, but what you offer is invaluable." Alex felt a small thrill at the compliment. A dragon veteran was thanking him, a simple mechanic. It made him realize just how much this journey was changing him. He wasn't just fixing machines anymore. He was part of something bigger, something that had the potential to change the course of history. Helping Thalros, a legendary warrior, was just the beginning. Over the next few days, Alex's understanding of Thalros deepened. He learned more about the dragon's past, the battles he had fought, and the countless worlds he had seen. Thalros was no ordinary warrior. He had fought in wars between dragonkind and alien species, faced enemies with powers that could warp time and space, and helped lead his people to victory in some of the most dangerous and decisive battles the universe had ever known. But with every story, there was a sense of loss, a quiet sorrow in Thalros's voice. One night, as they sat around a small campfire outside the workshop, Thalros shared a story that shook Alex to his core. "There was a time," Thalros began, his voice somber, "when my people and the humans were allies. We fought side by side against a common enemy, an enemy so dangerous that it threatened to wipe us all out. We fought for survival, for freedom, and we won. But after the war, the alliance broke apart. The humans became distrustful of us and the dragons." He trailed off for a moment before finishing. "The dragons turned inward, retreating to their lands, away from the rest of the galaxy. I was one of the few who remained out here, still fighting, still looking for something to hold on to. A reason to keep going." Alex listened wide-eyed. He had never known that dragons and humans had once been allies. The thought of it was both strange and fascinating. "You were part of that?" Alex asked. Thalros nodded. "I was. But that was a long time ago. Now the universe has changed, and so have I. The old alliances are gone, but I still fight. I still search for a purpose." Alex felt a lump form in his throat. Thalros's story, his struggles, his sacrifices, everything about the dragon seemed to hold so much weight. He realized how much was riding on this journey, not just for him, but for Thalros too. "We'll find your purpose," Alex said, more to himself than to the dragon. "You're not alone in this anymore. We're in this together." Thalros turned his gaze toward him, a flicker of something, perhaps gratitude, shining in his eyes. Yes, together. From that moment, something changed between them. It was more than just a mechanic fixing a ship for a dragon. They had become allies in every sense of the word. Alex's world, which had once revolved around machines and technology, had expanded to include ancient legends, forgotten wars, and powerful beings. As the days passed, the ship slowly began to take shape. It wasn't perfect, but it was getting closer. The ship, which had once been a simple project for Alex, was now something much more important. It was the means by which Thalros would return to the stars, a step toward reclaiming his purpose. And Alex, for the first time in his life, felt like he was part of something much bigger than he had ever imagined. They were ready, the ship was prepared, and their journey was about to begin. And though Alex didn't know what lay ahead, he knew one thing for sure. Whatever happened next, he and Thalros would face it together. The day the ship was finally ready to fly, there was a sense of anticipation in the air. Alex had spent weeks getting it as perfect as he could, with Thalros's help. The ship, though far from perfect, was now capable of space travel. The engines hummed steadily, the systems were operational, and the hull, though patched and reinforced, seemed ready for whatever lay beyond the atmosphere. It was a moment of triumph, but Alex knew that this was just the beginning. Standing on the edge of the launch pad, Falrose was quiet, his massive form casting a long shadow under the fading light of the twin suns. His wings were tucked neatly against his back, but his eyes, ancient and full of secrets, were fixed on the sky. There was a kind of peace in his demeanor, but also something else, a deep sense of resolve. This journey wasn't just about the ship. It was about Falrose reclaiming his place in the universe. Alex stood beside him, feeling both nervous and excited. He had never flown into space before, let alone piloted a ship that had been cobbled together with spare parts and whatever tools he had on hand. But he wasn't just doing this for himself anymore. He was helping Falrose find something that had been lost long ago. His purpose. "Ready?" Alex asked, trying to hide the nervousness in his voice. Falrose turned his gaze to him. "More than ready," he said with a small, reassuring smile. "We leave now, but we are not just flying away from this place. We are leaving behind the ghosts of the past." With a deep breath, Alex climbed into the cockpit of the ship. The controls were a bit complicated, a mixture of human tech and alien influence, but Alex had grown used to the strange setup. He had learned everything he could about the ship in the past few weeks, even the parts that seemed completely foreign to him. It wasn't perfect, but it would get them where they needed to go. As the engines roared to life, Alex felt the ship vibrate beneath him. The sky outside began to darken as the ship slowly lifted off the ground, breaking free of the planet's gravitational pull. The stars came into view, vast and endless, like a tapestry of possibility. Alex glanced over at Falrose, who sat quietly beside him, his expression unreadable. "Next stop?" Alex asked, trying to break the silence. Falrose looked out the window, his gaze distant. "The Rift," he said softly. "It is a place of legend, where reality itself bends and warps. I've heard whispers of it for centuries. It's said that those who enter the Rift can unlock the greatest secrets of the universe. But it's also a place of danger. Many have gone, and none have returned." Alex swallowed hard, feeling the weight of Falrose's words. The Rift. It sounded like something out of a fairy tale, but from the look on Falrose's face, it was clear that this was no story. It was real, and it was dangerous. Still, Alex trusted the dragon. If anyone could navigate the unknown, it was Falrose. And if this rift could give Falrose the answers he was seeking, Alex was determined to help him find it. They drifted further into space, leaving the planet and its familiar sights behind. The ship moved smoothly through the void, and Alex felt the tension in his shoulders begin to ease. The stars stretched out before them, and for a moment, the vastness of space felt overwhelming. But then he remembered what Falrose had said. They were leaving the past behind. This was a new beginning for both of them. Hours passed, and the ship's systems kept them on course. Alex occasionally glanced at Falrose, who was silent, lost in thought. The journey was quiet, but Alex didn't mind. There was something peaceful about the vast emptiness of space, something calming about the rhythmic hum of the engines. Then suddenly, the ship's sensors beeped, pulling Alex out of his thoughts. A red light flashed across the dashboard, and an alert warning blared through the speakers. Something was wrong. "Falrose," Alex called, his voice tense. "We've got a problem." Falrose straightened up, his eyes scanning the readouts. "What's happening?" he asked, his voice calm, but there was a hint of urgency beneath it. "It's the Rift," Alex said, his fingers flying over the controls. "It's not just a place in space. It's a force. Something is pulling us in." The ship lurched suddenly, throwing Alex forward in his seat. He quickly grabbed the controls, trying to stabilize the ship, but the pull was too strong. The warning lights on the dashboard blinked wildly, and the ship began to shake violently. "Hold on," Alex shouted as the ship was pulled toward the rift, the stars outside twisting and warping in a way that made Alex feel dizzy. The fabric of reality itself seemed to bend, stretching and shifting in ways he couldn't understand. Falrose was gripping the sides of his seat, his eyes wide and alert. "This is no ordinary anomaly," he said, his voice grim. "The rift is not just a place. It's a living force. We must stay focused, or it will consume us." Alex's hands were shaking as he fought to keep the ship steady. He could see the edges of the rift now, a swirling mass of colors and lights that seemed to pulse with energy. It was beautiful, but terrifying at the same time. The ship was being pulled in faster now, and Alex had no control over it. "Falrose," Alex yelled. "What do we do? I can't stop it." Falrose's gaze was sharp. "Trust yourself, Alex. This is where your skill as a mechanic matters. The ship is not just a machine. It is a part of the universe itself. You must understand it." Alex's heart raced. He wasn't sure what Falrose meant, but he had no time to question it. The ship was being torn apart, and he had to act fast. He glanced at the controls again, seeing a pattern in the way the ship's systems were reacting to the rift. There was a way to harness its energy, to use the ship's own systems to stabilize them. He just had to figure out how. As the rift grew larger, Alex focused all of his attention on the controls, his hands moving with purpose. He adjusted the ship's energy flow, rerouted power to the shields, and aligned the systems in a way that he hoped would work. The ship bucked and jolted, but Alex held on, trusting his instincts. Then, just as the ship was about to be pulled into the heart of the rift, there was a sudden burst of light, and everything went silent. For a moment, Alex thought they were done for. But then, the ship's shaking stopped. The systems flickered back to life, and the eerie feeling of being sucked into another dimension faded. Alex slowly opened his eyes, his chest rising and falling with each deep breath. Falrose was staring out the window, his expression unreadable. "We made it," Alex said, his voice shaky with relief. "We're alive." But Falrose didn't respond. His eyes were fixed on something far beyond the ship, something Alex couldn't see. For the first time, the dragon looked unsettled. "This is just the beginning," Falrose muttered. "The rift has shown us a glimpse of what lies ahead. We are not alone here." Alex felt a chill run down his spine. He didn't know what lay beyond the rift, but he had a feeling that it would change everything. The silence in the cockpit was almost unbearable as Alex tried to process what had just happened. The ship had made it through the rift. Barely, but something in the air felt different now. It wasn't just the physical disorientation from their abrupt passage through the anomaly. It was something deeper, something unsettling. Falrose was still staring out the window, his ancient eyes narrowed as if trying to decipher something that was just beyond his reach. "Falrose." Alex's voice was barely above a whisper, but it cut through the stillness. "What's happening? What did we just experience?" Falrose didn't immediately answer. His gaze was fixed on the vast emptiness ahead of them, his claws tapping lightly against the armrest. It was as if the world around him had disappeared, and all that existed was the strange, swirling energy they had just passed through. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, Falrose spoke, his voice low and grave. "The rift, it is not just a place. It is a doorway, a threshold to something much older, much more powerful than anything we have ever known. I've heard rumors, ancient whispers among my kind, but I never truly believed them." Alex felt his stomach twist at the dragon's words. But doorway? To what? He looked around the cockpit, his hands tightening on the controls. The stars outside were different now. They weren't the same ones they had seen before. The colors were shifting, changing, warping in ways that defied all logic. "We're in a different part of space," Alex said, more to himself than to Falrose. "This isn't where we were supposed to be." Falrose nodded slowly. "No, it's not. And we are not alone here. Just as Thalros finished speaking, a strange vibration rattled through the ship. The console flickered, warning lights began to blink again, and the ship jolted as if something heavy had brushed against it. Alex's heart skipped a beat as he glanced at the systems. "Something's out there," Alex said, his voice tight with tension. He could feel the ship shaking, as if something was trying to grab hold of them, pulling them deeper into this unfamiliar region of space. Thalros stood up from his seat, his enormous wings stretching out slightly as he moved toward the viewport. "I can feel it," he said, his voice filled with a quiet intensity. "We are not alone here. There are others, something, watching us." Before Alex could respond, the ship was rocked again, this time much harder. He grabbed the controls, trying to stabilize it, but it was as if an invisible force was tugging at the ship from all directions. The lights flickered violently, and the walls seemed to pulse with an unnatural energy. The entire craft groaned under the strain. "We need to leave," Alex shouted, panic creeping into his voice. He tried to engage the thrusters, but they were unresponsive. Something was interfering with the ship's systems, preventing them from moving. Thalros's sharp eyes scanned the stars outside, then turned to Alex with a rare urgency. "No, we cannot leave yet." Alex blinked, confused. "What do you mean we can't leave?" "The ship's failing. We have to get out of here." Thalros's eyes glinted with determination. "If we leave now, we may never get another chance to understand what this place truly is. Whatever is here, whatever ancient force watches over this realm, it may hold the key to everything I've been searching for. My people, their past, this war, these battles, they are all connected to this place." Alex's mind raced. He didn't fully understand what Thalros was talking about, but he could feel the weight of the dragon's words. The tension in the air was thick, like the universe itself was holding its breath. They were standing at the edge of something much larger than either of them had anticipated, and Alex knew there was no going back now. "All right," Alex said, forcing himself to focus. "But we need to stabilize the ship first. Otherwise, we won't be able to do anything." Thalros gave a single firm nod. "I will assist you," he said. With a deep breath, Alex returned to the controls, his hands flying over the dashboard. The systems were still malfunctioning, but Alex had learned enough about the ship in the past few weeks to know where he could make adjustments. He rerouted power to the shielding and tried to engage the main thrusters again. The ship rocked again, more violently this time, but Alex refused to give up. He wasn't going to let the ship fall apart now, not when they were so close. Finally, after a tense few moments, the ship stabilized. The shaking ceased, and the warning lights on the dashboard stopped flashing. The systems hummed back to life, and Alex let out a breath he didn't realize he'd been holding. But the danger wasn't over yet. They still didn't know what was out there, or what had caused the ship to shake in the first place. As the ship's systems stabilized, Alex turned to Thalros, his voice steady but filled with uncertainty. "What now?" Thalros's eyes glinted, his wings twitching slightly in anticipation. "Now we explore." Alex frowned. "Explore? What if it's too dangerous?" Thalros's gaze softened, a rare look of understanding in his eyes. "You fear what lies ahead, and that is natural. But sometimes you must face the unknown to find the truth. We cannot hide from it. Not anymore." Alex's stomach tightened again, but he nodded. He had no choice but to trust Thalros. The dragon had been through wars, battles, and countless dangers. If anyone could guide them through this, it was him. The ship slowly moved forward, the stars outside shifting in strange patterns as they continued to drift deeper into this strange realm. Alex couldn't shake the feeling that something ancient, was watching them. His hands gripped the controls, his mind racing with questions. They flew through the strange, shifting starscape, the darkness of space growing deeper and more ominous as they ventured further. Suddenly, in the distance, Alex saw something that made his blood run cold. A massive shape, like a shadow, stretched across the stars, blocking out the light in a way that made the void around it seem even darker. "What is that?" Alex whispered, his voice barely audible. Falrose's gaze was fixed on the shadow. "It is the remnant, a creature born from the rift itself. It is ancient, older than even my kind. It has existed for eons, guarding this place." Alex's mind raced. A creature, a guardian. This was getting worse by the minute. The remnant was watching them, and its presence alone seemed to bend the very fabric of reality around them. "We need to leave," Alex said urgently. "We can't fight something like that." But Falrose's eyes were steady, filled with an intensity that Alex couldn't fully comprehend. "We cannot run from it. Not this time. We must face it, if we are to learn the truth about the rift." Before Alex could protest, the ship's systems were flooded with a sudden surge of energy, and the remnant's form began to shift, moving toward them with impossible speed. "We're not alone anymore," Falrose said, his voice grim. "Now we see if we can survive what's watching us." And with that, the battle for their lives, and for the secrets of the rift, had only just begun. The atmosphere in the cockpit was thick with tension as Alex gripped the controls, his knuckles turning white. The massive shadow of the remnant loomed ahead, its shape warping and shifting as if it were made of the very fabric of space itself. It was unlike anything Alex had ever seen before, an entity that defied logic and nature, existing in a way that twisted the universe around it. He could feel the ship's hull vibrate as the creature drew closer, the air growing heavier with every passing moment. "Falrose." Alex's voice was tight with panic. "What are we supposed to do? We can't outrun it." Falrose's sharp gaze never wavered from the growing form of the remnant. "We can't outrun it, no," he said, his voice low and steady. "But we don't need to run. We need to face it, learn from it. The remnant is a creature born from the rift. It's not just a beast. It's a guardian, a force that has watched over this realm for eons. It guards the knowledge of the rift. If we want answers, we must face it." Alex's heart raced. Facing a creature like this was the last thing he wanted to do. The remnant was a massive, shifting shadow, its form constantly changing and pulsating with dark energy. It was a living enigma, something beyond the reach of human understanding. But Falrose was right. They had come this far. There was no turning back now. "What does it want?" Alex asked, his voice trembling. "It wants to test us," Falrose replied. "The remnant does not attack randomly. It senses the intentions of those who enter this space. If we are worthy, it will let us pass. If we are not, we will be consumed by it." The air inside the cockpit grew thick with dread, and Alex could almost feel the weight of the remnant's presence pressing against them. His hands hovered over the controls, trying to keep the ship steady as the massive entity drew closer. He didn't know if they were ready for what was coming, but Falrose had faced countless battles, and if the dragon believed they had a chance, then Alex would follow. "Can we communicate with it?" Alex asked, though he wasn't sure if he even believed it was possible. Falrose shook his head, his expression grim. "The remnant does not speak in any way we can understand. It communicates through actions, through trials. It will show us what we need to do. We must trust in the ship, in our skills, and in each other." Alex nodded, though the knot in his stomach remained. There was no way to prepare for what was coming, but they had no other choice. They were standing at the edge of something ancient, something powerful, and the only way to move forward was to face it head-on. The remnant's massive form began to move in their direction, its shape shifting rapidly as it advanced. It wasn't just a shadow. It was as if the stars themselves were bending around it, twisting and warping. The fabric of space seemed to ripple with every movement it made. Alex felt the ship's hull creak and groan under the pressure of the strange energy surrounding them. Suddenly, the ship jolted forward, a force pulling them toward the remnant. Alex fought to regain control, but the ship was being drawn into the creature's orbit, as if they were caught in its gravitational pull. "It's testing us," Falros said, his voice barely audible over the rising hum of the ship's systems. "Hold your course. Don't let it break you." Alex clenched his teeth and gripped the controls with all his strength. The ship's systems were flickering, and the navigation readouts were scrambled. It felt as though the very air around them was alive, shifting and distorting. The remnant was pushing against them with all its power, testing their resolve. "I'm trying," Alex yelled, but his voice sounded weak in the face of the overwhelming force pulling at them. "This thing is stronger than anything I've ever felt." Falros remained calm. "Focus on the ship, Alex. You've done this before. Think of it as a machine. A powerful one. Adjust its flow. Use its energy against the remnant." Alex nodded, though his heart was racing. He had never faced anything like this before. The ship was a living entity now, a part of the strange universe they had entered. He could feel the hum of its energy beneath his fingers, like a pulse that synchronized with his own heartbeat. The remnant continued to close in on them, and Alex's mind began to work quickly. He could feel the pull of the creature growing stronger, its energy trying to overwhelm the ship. But then he remembered something. Something Falros had told him. The ship wasn't just metal and circuits. It was more than that. It had been forged with materials from the rift, altered by energies Alex didn't fully understand. The ship was part of this place now, and it had the power to tap into the same forces the remnant controlled. With a deep breath, Alex began to adjust the ship's energy flow, rerouting power to the shields and weapons systems. The hum of the ship grew louder, and the ship's systems began to respond to his commands. He could feel the energy of the remnant pushing against him, but now he was using it to his advantage. Slowly, the ship began to resist the pull, the force of the remnant's grip weakening as the energy flow stabilized. "It's working," Alex shouted, the relief evident in his voice. "We're not being pulled in anymore." But just as Alex thought they were in the clear, the remnant seemed to shift again. The shadowy form before them twisted into something more solid, more defined. It wasn't just a shapeless mass anymore. It was taking shape, becoming something more tangible. From the dark void, the remnant's form began to reveal itself, piece by piece. A pair of enormous, glowing eyes appeared first, burning with an eerie light that filled the cockpit. The rest of the creature's body followed. A massive, serpentine figure, composed of dark, swirling energy, with tendrils that reached out like arms. It wasn't just a guardian. It was a living embodiment of the rift itself. And it wasn't backing down. Alex's breath caught in his throat as the remnant loomed larger than ever, its tendrils reaching out toward the ship with terrifying speed. It was clear now that this was a test, not just of their ability to control the ship, but of their very will to survive. "We have to face it directly," Falros said, his voice unwavering. "This is where the real trial begins." Alex's mind raced. He wasn't sure what Falros meant by facing it directly, but the dragon's calm presence gave him a strange sense of clarity. They had to prove themselves worthy, prove they could withstand the power of the rift and the remnant. The ship shuddered again, and Alex's heart pounded in his chest. This was it. Whatever happened next, they would have to face the remnant head-on. There was no turning back. With a deep breath, Alex made his decision. He would trust in the ship, in Falros, and in himself. He would face the remnant and whatever the rift had in store. And together, they would uncover the truth about this ancient force, and hopefully, survive it. As the ship braced for the inevitable clash, Alex knew one thing for certain. Their journey had just become a battle for survival. And the outcome was anything but certain. The moment the ship's systems aligned with the strange energy of the remnant, Alex felt the air around him grow even heavier, charged with an electric intensity. It wasn't just the pull of the creature or the forces of the rift that were pressing against them now. It was the undeniable sense that time itself had slowed, that the universe had taken a deep breath, and was waiting for the next move. Alex gripped the controls tighter, his eyes focused on the massive, serpentine figure that was quickly closing in on them. Its tendrils stretched outward, sharp and dark, like the threads of some cosmic web, seeking to entangle the ship, pulling them closer to its core. It was like an unstoppable force, an entity made of pure energy, and Alex had no idea how they could overcome it. Falrose, what now? Alex's voice cracked with the weight of his growing fear, but he fought to keep his composure. This thing, it's not like anything I've ever faced before. How do we fight something that's not even real? Falrose was standing tall, his wings slightly unfurled, his ancient eyes narrowed with a piercing intensity. The dragon didn't seem afraid. Instead, he radiated the calm of someone who had stared into the heart of destruction and lived to tell the tale. "We don't fight it in the way you're thinking, Alex," Falrose replied, his voice low and steady. "The remnant is not an enemy we can defeat by force. It tests us not just with power, but with the strength of our resolve. What we must do now is show it that we are worthy." Alex's confusion must have been clear on his face because Falrose continued. "The remnant is not like other creatures," the dragon explained. "It is a part of the rift, a sentient force that chooses who it allows to pass through. To survive this, we must prove that we have the courage, the will, and the understanding to challenge the very fabric of reality it guards." Alex could feel the ship lurch again as a massive tendril of darkness reached out toward them, scraping along the sides of the hull. The warning lights began to blink again, and the ship's systems crackled with distortion. He could feel the pressure of the force pushing against them, a nearly physical sensation that made the air inside the cockpit feel thick, oppressive. "But how do we prove we're worthy?" Alex asked, his voice tight, though he trusted Falrose. He just didn't know what was expected of him now. The dragon's gaze locked onto the ship's control panels. "You must trust the ship, trust your instincts. The ship was forged with parts of the rift, and it understands the very forces we're up against. You must use its energy. Become one with the ship, just as you did when you fixed it." Alex's mind raced. He'd been working with this ship for weeks, fixing it, learning how to use its systems and quirks. But he had never truly thought of it as anything more than a machine, just a vehicle to get them from one point to another. Now Falrose was asking him to think of it as something alive, something that had a connection to this strange, cosmic place. The ship trembled again as another tendril lashed out, and Alex could see the intense glow of the remnant's eyes burning through the darkness outside. It was getting closer. They didn't have much time. "All right," Alex said, his voice more confident now, though his heart was still racing. "Let's do this." He closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push out the fear and focus on the ship. He could feel the hum beneath him, the energy that ran through its systems like a pulse, alive and vibrant. The ship was part of the rift, like Falrose had said. It had been shaped by forces beyond anything Alex could understand. But that also meant it had a kind of power, one that could tap into the same forces that the remnant controlled. He reached out, placing his hands on the controls once more, but this time, he didn't just try to manipulate the ship's systems. He felt them. Felt the way the energy flowed, the way it connected to the very fabric of the rift. The ship wasn't just metal and wiring. It was part of the universe itself. He could sense it, a kind of deep cosmic rhythm, like the heartbeat of the cosmos itself. Slowly, Alex began to adjust the flow of energy, rerouting the ship's systems in a way he had never done before. His fingers moved with purpose, as though his body and the ship were one. He could feel the ship responding, its power sensing with the strange, chaotic energy of the rift. The tendrils of the remnant were almost upon them now, stretching out like an unyielding grasp, but Alex kept his focus. The ship shuddered as the strange energy intensified, and then, with a sudden burst, a wave of light radiated from the ship, pushing back against the remnant's tendrils. The creature shrieked, or at least, Alex thought it did, though it didn't make a sound. Instead, there was a strange, rippling sensation in the air, as if the remnant was being repelled by something it had never encountered before, the will of a being in harmony with the very forces it commanded. For a moment, everything stood still. The ship hung in the air, suspended in the vast emptiness of space, and Alex could feel the energy of the rift all around them, twisting and pulsing like the very lifeblood of the universe itself. Falros stood tall beside him, watching intently. His gaze softened for just a moment. "Well done, Alex." Alex didn't have time to respond. The remnant was shifting again, its massive form writhing and twisting as it tried to regroup, but the ship's newfound energy pushed back against it. This wasn't just a battle of power anymore. It was a battle of will and understanding. The ship wasn't just an object. It was an extension of Alex himself, an extension of the forces of the rift. As the remnant writhed against them, the ship began to emit a low, vibrating hum. It wasn't just a noise. It was a call. A deep, resonant sound that filled the space around them, reverberating through the very fabric of the rift. The ship was speaking to the remnant, not through words, but through a shared understanding of what it represented. The remnant paused, as if in recognition, its tendrils retracting slightly. Alex didn't let up. He maintained his focus, guiding the ship's energy flow as he had learned to do. His mind, once filled with fear, was now calm, guided by an inner certainty that the ship was not just a tool, but a bridge to something greater. The remnant, sensing their resolve, began to pull back, its massive form shrinking, as if it had acknowledged that they were worthy, that they had earned the right to pass through the rift. The dark energy that had once seemed all-consuming was now beginning to dissipate, and the ship's systems hummed with a harmonious resonance. "We've done it," Alex said, his voice quiet with awe. Falros didn't respond immediately. He was staring at the retreating form of the remnant, his eyes full of ancient wisdom. "This was only the first step, Alex. We have passed the test, but there is much more ahead. The rift holds secrets, but they are not easily won. What lies ahead will be even more dangerous than what we have faced." Alex swallowed, but for the first time in a long while, he felt a sense of purpose. He had done something no one had ever done before. He had faced the unknown, and together with Falros, he had found a way to survive. "We're ready," Alex said, his voice stronger now. "Whatever comes next, we'll face it together." And with that, the ship sailed deeper into the rift, ready to uncover the secrets of the universe, and to face whatever dangers lay in the uncharted dark.